What happens when two seasoned business leaders get together? They talk shop, of course. Sit back and listen in as Scott DeLong and Vince Moiso share from their experience around current issues facing executives, entrepreneurs, and their leadership teams. The CEO Podcast starts now.
Hey everybody, Scott DeLong with the CEO Podcast, here with my partner Vince Moiso, and we're going to be talking today on a subject that it's actually not one of my favorite subjects. So I'm going to tell you, this is not an area of strength for me. Although I know academically or theoretically all the right things to do, I can't say that I always practice them. And it's about the bad hire, hiring somebody that's just not right for the organization. Hardly ever has it ever been, for me at least, that they didn't have the skill set. But what the problem is when they don't have the culture fit, right? So I've gone a lot now to hiring for culture and training for skills, and that's not 100% either, because you need somebody that can be able to do the job, get up and running pretty quick as well. So it's not an easy thing to hire. In fact, I was just reading some stats the other day that said that 20% of all of your turnover happens within 45 days of the persons that you've hired. Meaning, of all the people that have left, a fifth of them are leaving within 45 days of joining the company. Going a little bit further, 26% of all new hires last or leave within a year. Within a year, 26%.
That makes sense to me, though, because you know pretty fast, especially if they're going to leave on their own accord, right? The opposite, where I've made those mistakes as well. I mean, I'd call a little bit of a hybrid when we talk about the best practice of hiring slow and firing fast, right? I've certainly followed that in many regards, but I've also made the mistake of hanging on too long and making mistakes with hires, bad hires, things like that. And I own every single one. I mean, really, point the finger inward. I got to tell you, there's hiring's difficult, but I can go back to just about every instance and see that there was a breakdown in the process. I didn't follow the normal process, or I got sucked into that recommendation, or I got sucked into the resume, right? Which, if you rely too much on what's on paper, you could get sold a bill of goods.
Or just their charm. I mean, I've been fooled by someone's charm. I got fooled by, we had a guy one time that was a colonel in the Army Reserve. We don't make colonel just by accident.
Right.
Honestly, I have no idea how he became a colonel after working with him.
Yeah.
And I left this guy in place for 9 months because I felt bad for him. Not a great place to leave, or not a great reason to leave someone in place because you feel bad for them. Here's the downside of that. Well, first of all, there is a fallacy here, and that is, I don't want to hire somebody, they really need the job. Almost always, if you're not happy with them, they're not happy with you either.
Yeah.
It's a two-way street.
Yeah.
And they're not going to leave the job until they find something else. So I'm a believer in severance, providing severance for people, even new hires, so that they have a chance to survive while they're looking for this new job.
Runway.
We had a situation the other day talking with a woman who's told me that her husband was looking for a new job because he didn't really like the one he had. And come to find out, within a few weeks, they told him, we don't want you here anymore either, right? And it crushed him. Like, why would that crush you? That was you didn't like them, they didn't like you. It's the way it works out.
I don't
right?
get it either, man.
That made no sense to me. But it doesn't feel good to get fired. I understand that. And did you say hiring is difficult? Firing is really difficult. I have a hard time with it. I hate looking someone in the eye and saying, hey, this isn't working out.
Yeah.
Right? It's or breaking up with someone. Oh, it's not you, it's me. Well, it probably was me.
Yeah.
But the fact is, it's still not easy to do.
No, reality is I can think of what comes to mind is a few specific hires, and shame on me. I did those people a disservice to put them in the position when they were not suited for the position. Yeah. And that's my fault. That's not their fault. It really isn't. And I didn't do the diligence. I didn't run the process. In one instance, I followed a recommendation from a trusted source, and I cut through my normal process
Yeah.
as a result of that. And it's not the trusted source's fault, because why? They weren't close enough to the organization to know exactly what they wanted. They simply just recommended
This is a good person.
That's it.
Right.
So then it's my job to take that person through the proper process.
And if there's a good fit,
Yeah.
a good person and a good fit.
Yeah.
Just because I'm getting rid of somebody doesn't mean you're bad. It's not, this isn't working here, and it's going to be better for you in the long run too.
No, it's funny. I thought of the one instance because I do know that person also wasn't happy, and so yet they're incredibly disgruntled. This is years at this point.
Sure.
But it's weird. That's always a strange concept to me, to be disgruntled for something that you wanted anyway.
Happens.
It does, but like to me that just reiterates what a bad hire it was. 'Cause
So
you're just not a fit.
Not only is it good for the company, it's good for the other person.
Yeah.
Almost always. When they get let go
is.
for something that's not a good fit. And here's where it really matters, is to the rest of the people on your team.
Yeah.
You're putting up with subpar performance, attitude, whatever it is that you're not liking about the person, and they don't get to get away with that same kind of stuff.
No, and
it's
there's
not
just
fair.
there's a toxicity to that, right?
Absolutely.
And then we're going to talk, I think, in a different podcast episodes, because I'll tell our listeners, I'll just give them a little hint
Go
that
ahead.
this is going to end up being a 3-parter, because this is really critical stuff.
Yep.
Hiring is not easy. Hiring bad is bad, and it's easy to do. It is easy to do, and we've all done it. And there's some things to think about. But I don't want to go deep on the toxic part. But I will say,
well, let's talk about what part 2 is really quick, and that is from the employee's point of view, when it wasn't a fit for them. So part 2, if this is going to be from the employer's point of view, what do you do?
Yeah.
And part 2 is going to be from the employee's point of view, what to do, how to do it, how to try to influence things, and then the third one is going to be on the toxic work environment.
Well, when I talk about, when you do, as a leader, you make a bad hire, and then you've got the wrong person in the wrong position, they're not a cultural fit or whatever that is. The toxicity from that, like, that person might not be toxic. They might be a good person, right? They're just not a good fit for that particular position. Your example was great, because you've got this team that's running at this level, and you got someone else that's just not running with them. And that in itself can be toxic, because they're dragging that other person along with them. And I think some of my worst mistakes have been in sales, right? In sales positions. And that's tough, because a sales position is the easiest to measure, right? To measure productivity. And I think that's a challenge to make a bad hire. And the length of time, due to the sales cycle and sales process, the length of time to replace that person, go through that process, go through the development and any sort of training. And
so let's talk about bad hire and sales, because you went to sales, and I get it. So if you've got a high performing or above average performing salesperson that is a bad culture fit and creating issues in the company, keep them, coach them, move them on. What would you do in that scenario?
That's a tough one. That's a tough one to answer, because I think you could go across any industry with just about any company, and more often than not, the practice is to keep them.
Yeah.
So I think oftentimes the high performer, what most companies do, and I've been a culprit of this myself in multiple organizations, you just put up with the bad behavior.
Keep them and isolate them. So here's what I've done with it.
That's it.
I've tended to keep them because they're producing for me.
Yeah.
I then want to coach them because I think I can fix them.
Yeah.
And then I end up isolating them, putting off to the side so that they don't have to deal with everybody else.
Yeah.
And then you end up having to hire someone else to work in between them and the rest of the organization.
Yeah.
I don't know that that's the right process as well. However, but that's what most of us do with a salesperson.
I think the right approach, and I've learned a lot from it in my experience over 25 years, is to coach and then surround them with proper support. Yeah. And I think I think ultimately what we're talking about isn't necessarily toxic. It's more
disruptive.
Disruptive.
Yeah.
And I think if you can start to eliminate the disruption, create the support mechanisms that are there and coach to a point, right? I think that's healthy, but not fix.
No, well,
I think fixing. You're right, and I've done that. I've tried to fix, and that doesn't work. Coaching is important, though,
and can go so far. So, listen, we're going to stay in the sales piece for a minute because they're genuinely affable people.
Yeah.
High achievers.
Yeah.
Production oriented, and when they're disruptive, we've put up with it. However, I'm not sure that's the right thing because of all the people they're disrupting.
Mm-hmm.
I have never, I take that back, I've gotten rid of one disruptive salesperson that was producing.
Mm-hmm.
Not because she was disrupting everybody else, because it finally got to me.
Yeah.
And that's the wrong decision at that point, right? I waited too long for that. So
I have moved on from the disruptive salesperson for sure. And I also haven't, right? But I don't know. I mean, at some point, to your point, whether it's right, wrong, or otherwise, or you wait too long, at some point, that person's going to wear their welcome out. I mean, they just are.
And my guess is, and I don't really know because we're always fearful that salesperson is going to take their customers with them somewhere else to their next gig, right? But if they're disrupting us, they might be disrupting those customers as well. They might be annoying to them as well.
Yeah.
So I need to rethink my process on the fire fast more than and for the good of the organization, not just for easy for me to put up with stuff, right? So
it's tough to. Here's what I'd tell you with any hire. I mean, there are many hires that I'm very proud of. At the same time, I can tell you one of the challenges, and I don't care what position you're talking about, is to check every box is damn near impossible. I mean, obviously it depends on the criteria.
Sure.
I certainly have a lot of criteria and expectations of coming into my organization, but at the same time, we're not looking to check every single box, because then you get to a point where you're searching for a unicorn, right? And you might find there are unicorns out there that do exist. Not saying they don't exist, but in the marketplace, but I think to expect that you're going to fill every position that way. So there is a level of great. This person's a very coachable person. I think they have most of the skill set that I want, and I think I can develop that person into this position. I think they've got a lot of growth opportunity.
That's worth working on.
Yeah, so there's talent that you see as a leader that you can bring up to speed. I mean, sometimes I have hired just on culture fit, where they're a talented person, they've got a skill set, but they're such a good culture fit that I've got to have them in the organization, and we're going to find a place for them. And so you put them in a position that you have open and available, and you explore and allow that person to grow and develop that person.
Yeah, you can't hire a brain surgeon on culture fit alone. However, there's a lot of jobs in the business world that you can hire on culture fit and train the person for the job, and they'll do just fine. In fact, flourish because they love the environment. You're giving them an opportunity. They're learning and growing. That's wonderful.
Well, what's the number one? So for you, then what would be the number one criteria that you would hire on?
For me, the number one has always been culture fit.
Yeah,
and not. We just got through talking about the cult of a business organization. Yeah. Not cultish culture. I do want diversity in thought. I do want people that are going to challenge the process. Absolutely. I love that. I love
independent, be empowered.
Right, to challenge the process, but do it in a respectful way to the other people around you. Not just to the boss, but to the peers and, in fact, the people that are your subordinates. Being respectful to those people, and that's part of the culture that fits in there. So, I've got some set core values that fit within my organization. Trust. If we can't establish trust, you can't be here, right? integrity. If you can't do what you say you're going to do and be consistent with that,
Yeah.
you're not going to end up being here. Respect, that's another one. And I'm not talking about the respect for that high producer over there, the high achiever. I'm talking about respect for human dignity.
Yeah.
Respect others, human dignity.
Yeah.
And then the last one is courage. Right? Well, that's a weird core value. No, courage. Not just because you're a tiger, you're going to go take. No.
I get it.
Challenge me.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, the courage to do it, right?
Yeah, having the courage to do it. I've got to provide the space for them to do that. But if they don't have the courage to do that and I just get the yes person, man, that's not going to work for me either.
Well, you bring up an interesting point because when the way that my interview process has evolved is I really take a lot of time to talk about the values of the business and the culture of the business. I want that person to know what they are. Then I want to hear from them how they think they're a fit.
Give me an example of a time when.
Yeah. And so we have a couple of values as well. Like my two most important. One is get real, which basically means transparency, integrity, and authenticity. And then I've got empowerment, right? And it's empowering people to do their job and do it successfully. So that's those two things are so important to the culture. Is I want to understand what those things mean to the person I'm talking to and how they think they fit into that. So that part of the process is a thing that I've evolved to. That's so critical that if that gets missed, then I'm increasing my chance of a bad hire. There's no question.
Yeah. So even in an engineer or a chemist in your case, right?
Don't care what it is.
It doesn't matter. They have to have those skill sets. The engineers, the chemists, the brain surgeon, they have to have a skill set.
Yeah,
got
absolutely.
that. Understand.
But can they fit in that environment?
Can they fit in the environment?
Because the thing is that you're setting somebody up for disaster if they're, all of a sudden, like we've got a high culture of accountability, right? That's another one that I talk about. And if you can't handle that, I'm setting you up for failure.
Sure.
To come into this organization, and it's just the reality of it.
So I'm always hiring for value. So I've got an old EO buddy from EO Denver, actually, Lee Prosenjack. I don't know if you've ever met Lee.
I have met Lee.
But Lee does it a little bit different than you. So he brings the person into his office, and he has his core values all over his walls, but he has their back to that wall, and he asks questions, and then he makes the assessment if that fits his core values based on the questions he asks, rather than tell them what they are. Because you've said it, remember back when we had Lee Harrison here, and you talked about resumes and interviews, and people lie.
Yeah.
They tell you what they want to hear because they want to get the job. And that does happen, right? So I kind of liked his method that said, our values are all over the place, but I make sure their backs to them. Now, hopefully, you've looked at my website before you've come for an interview,
that's what I was just gonna say.
they're front and center there, so you know that. But that was an interesting take that Lee Prosenjack did with that. Want to see if people fit their values, not tell them what they are, and ask them how they fit.
Yeah.
So that was pretty interesting.
Well, and references are important. I think we're often quick. Sometimes processes are too quick to hire. I've seen companies just move too fast and they skip the reference part. Obviously, a recommendation from somebody is a great way to start a hiring process to avoid a bad hire. So when you do get that recommendation from a trusted source, but like I had mentioned earlier, I had done that, but then I skipped the process I just talked about.
Right.
So what I didn't realize is like they weren't a fit for the role that I put them in, and they weren't a great fit for the culture. And that's because I skipped that part and I just went off the recommendation. Recommendations are important. They're great. That transfer of trust is critical to avoid a bad hire. You still have to follow your process. That doesn't allow you to skip the process. And I think, getting a point of reference from others is also a big deal. And I want to hear from that person in terms of what research have they done, to your point. Like, what do you know? I'll ask the question, what do you know about our business? And what do you think of our business?
I knew your address.
Yeah.
I got here.
And if that's it, I'm kind of scratching my head. Really,
you didn't want this job.
You didn't do a single piece of research.
So this is a human resource thing, and I'm not a human resource expert. I'm not a lawyer, but I do know a little bit about this. And there's something called a probationary period or an introductory period.
Yeah, of course.
And it's really nonsense is really what it is.
Yeah.
I mean, there's one reason for it, because when you're an at will employer and employee relationship, you can let somebody go for any legal reason at any time, and not at the end of a probationary period. It used to be, and I understand this, but I remember back in my dating life, I was really great for 3 months at a time. I had great 3-month relationships, right? Because I could fool people for about 3 months, and then they figured out who I am, or I figured out who they were, and that's why the probation period ended up being 90 days, because that's about how long it takes for the tiger to show their stripes.
Yeah,
about 90 days that you will figure out whether it's for you, them, or they're for you, and all of that. But why the probationary period is a myth is that you don't. The only thing, so it used to be that you wouldn't start their insurance until they hit the probationary period.
Right.
Obamacare took care of that. You can't do that anymore. You have within 60 days that you have to get somebody back on their insurance policy. So from that point of view, that probationary period doesn't matter anymore. The other one, as I already mentioned, is that we're at will employers. I can let you go, you can leave. We don't have a contract on length of time to go on there. So probationary is also a negative word.
Mm-hmm.
You're on probation. That doesn't sound so good. How would you like to start a job and having someone tell you you're on probation? Yeah. You're in a probationary period. We're going to be looking over your shoulders, what it sounds like.
Well, and usually you're hiring for a permanent position. I mean, that's not true in all industries. There are, temporary, seasonal, and all these things, right? Of course. I think those are a little bit more challenging when you talk about the restaurant industry, especially fast food, these type of things.
The turnover there is much higher than...
No, I know many business owners that are in that industry, and they talk about the challenges of hiring. I mean, I don't envy that, right? That's a whole other ball game of what you're looking for and what you have to weed through and how you build that process. But I would say this is that within the hiring process, you've really got to stay true to whatever the process is that you build. And I think if you deviate from that, you every deviation is going to increase the chance of a bad hire. There's just no question about it. I do so here's another best practice that I would highly recommend. We've talked about DISC before on our podcast, and what's important to me is, especially in some of the higher level positions that I'm paying a lot of money for, I'm going to have that candidate do a DISC personality assessment
prior to an offer.
You
sure that's legal?
Well, it's not. I'm not doing it.
You can't not hire someone based on the answer.
No. But nor am I hiring somebody necessarily based on the answer. But I get to know a lot about them, about the DISC. Because, again, you got to remember what my vision of DISC is. There's no right or wrong in DISC. Right. There's no right or wrong. Just because you're a C doesn't mean you can't be in that position or whatever, right? Sure. My point being, though, is the DISC tells me a ton about that person. So I've heard a lot from that person during the interview process. Mm-hmm. I get to know them at a deeper level because of my understanding of DISC. And so
you're validating what you've already heard.
Yeah, so I look at the assessment and I can validate whether everything I've heard from them is in alignment with what their DISC tells me. Right?
Yeah.
So I've already built out the criteria of what I want for that position. So let's just talk, we were talking about sales before.
Sure.
So let's just say it's a sales position. I've already built out the criteria for the candidate that I want, right? The DISC assessment is going to give me a lot of insight as to whether or not what they've told me about meeting that criteria is in alignment with how they actually are.
I get it. That makes sense. So how do you convince me, this guy that has this hard-looking attitude but soft heart?
Oh, wait, right? I'm sorry, because I was going to tell you, and I want to lose this thought, is I share the DISC assessment with the candidate,
Okay.
right? They have it, and I go over it with
Okay.
them. Just FYI,
All right.
because I didn't want to leave that out as a best. I'm recommending that as a best practice, especially with critical hires. What is important is that you share that information with them. That's not just for you to look at and read and make some decision on. It's just a part of the process, and you should absolutely share that information with the candidate.
So let's go to this scenario because I need to be taught something here. Is how do you get someone like me to do the fire fast portion, thinking that I can coach them? I mean, I'm a coach. That's what I do. That's how I live. I can coach them into it. The success rate on a bad hire has not been great on coaching them into culture fit. Let's put it that.
Yeah.
Most of the hires that haven't worked out have been because of culture. Not because they couldn't add, put something on a spreadsheet, but it's been more culture fit. So, what's going to get what advice would you give me to get through my thick skull that says you need to get rid of that person because it's hurting the organization and it's not good for them either? I know that intellectually. I just have a trouble pulling the trigger.
Well, so I would say this is that I don't know anybody. I mean, I know there are people that like it, but certainly in my circle, I don't know anybody that likes to fire people.
Yeah.
They just don't. I don't. I don't. It's just a part of the job that isn't. There's nothing fun about it. To sit across from somebody and look them in the eyes and let them know whether you're just eliminating a position or they're just not a fit, or whatever the reasoning might be. Mm-hmm. I don't care what the reason is. It's not great because you're talking to a human being
blowing up their ego.
They're a human being, and they have responsibilities and they have things about their lives that you are now impacting by letting them go, and it doesn't feel good. And if you have a heart at all, which I know you do, Scott, if you have a heart, it tugs at the heart. I
do sleepless nights when I know I have to make that decision.
It's very stressful.
I should do it day one, and the first time I know, and I let it go, and I just don't sleep.
It's incredibly stressful. It really is. So I just want to point that out. That's just the reality of what we're dealing with, and whether it's a bad hire and whether it's your fault, it doesn't. It's almost worse because I can tell you in the few situations that I've been in with bad hires and I've had to let them go, it's the worst because not only am I impacting that person's life, and I got to have that conversation, which is very stressful leading up to that. On top of all that, it was my fault. I'm the one that made the hire in the first place. So what did I do?
Right.
Something happened within the process that broke down. That's my fault. I own that, and I put this person in the bad position in the first place. It's not their fault. And so what? I mean, so it ended up to be a toxic relationship in some way or the other. And so now I'm faced with, looking that person in the eyes, and I've got to let them go. Now, how do I get your question? Well, I didn't answer your question.
You didn't, because I'm still struggling.
I
have what I've tried to do, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But give me some good advice here.
Yeah. So here's the thing. I mean, I can tell you what. Let me just share what I've moved toward. Okay. I'm so committed to transparency. I'm so committed to the value of what I told you about is get real, right? And that is getting real. So and
you're doing it all along the way, so it's not going to be a shock.
Having the hard conversation has to happen before the release of that person ever actually occurs.
Yeah.
So if you've had multiple conversations around behavior, around expectations, not meeting expectations, around performance, things like that. I have the conversations around, I own my part of it. I'm not communicating in the right way. Maybe I'm not supporting in the right way, whatever that might be. Help me understand. So I've had those conversations. Help me understand why this is a challenge for you, because I'm asking you to do this. And it feels like it occurs for me that you're doing literally the exact opposite. So here's what I need from you moving forward. And then as those conversations continue to be a challenge, really you reach a point where it's inevitable. Yeah. So both parties are fully aware of the situation you're in. And so as I've practiced that, especially over the last decade of my career, it actually has gotten easier and easier. Not easier in the way of like, okay, I don't have a heart anymore
I love
or
doing
anything
this.
like that.
Yeah.
No. But I've been transparent through the process. So I'm at peace.
Okay.
It's created a personal peace because ultimately that's the blockage. So the bottleneck that you've created in making that happen is within yourself, right?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so if you haven't taken steps to get yourself at peace with the decision at the time you're ready to make that decision and move on, then you've done yourself a disservice, in my opinion.
Let me tell you what I do. Let me tell you what I used to do, and I'm much better than what I used to be. You remember growing up when you wanted to break up with a girl and you acted like a jerk until she broke up with you?
Yeah.
That was my management style 20 years ago. I would be a jerk. I don't want to be a jerk. Everyone else didn't want to feel that, right?
I've done that.
And I
I've
got
been there,
people.
done that.
I got people to quit because they didn't want to hang out with me.
I feel you.
Right. So
Yeah.
don't do that anymore. What I do now with the long-term employee, someone that's been there for a while, I use the performance improvement plan, and it's usually about a 90-day cycle. Here's your responsibilities. Here, what we're going to do to support you. And when it doesn't work, there's no surprises. It didn't work out, and that one's not so bad. But it's the new hire that I still struggle with. And here's what I've done, and I don't know if it's because of guilt or was the right thing to do, but new hire that didn't work out, and again, my fault for not following the process, I dump severance pay on them. I just give them a month's worth of pay, even if they've only been there 2.5 weeks.
Yeah.
Maybe it's the right thing to do, but I'm really, if I look internally, I'm probably doing it from my own guilt. That person's got to go home and tell their spouse, their children, their roommate that rent's going to be tough, next month.
Mm-hmm.
And so I try to make sure that's covered and give them a ramp to get to that next spot. Is it the right thing to do? I think so, but my motivation is to alleviate my guilt, and that's not the right thing to do.
Well, reality is severance is a subjective thing, right? So, I mean, I'd argue that the person on the other side of it might feel okay about it or might not. They may feel that they deserved more than what you gave them, even if they were there for only 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no way of you knowing that.
Right.
I think ultimately, whatever the reason that you put a severance check in front of somebody is the right reason. Like it's irrelevant. It's you as a business owner or a leader within the business deciding what to do for a person that you're letting go.
It helps me sleep better as well.
If it helps you sleep better,
It
then
does.
great. At the end of the day, it's your money, right? So if you decide to give somebody a severance, I'm a believer in severance, anyways. I know not all business owners are.
Right.
We could argue a lot of different ways for the appropriate amount of severance, right? And I think it varies from one industry to the next. I think it varies what position you're in, how long you've been with the company. There's all sorts of, let's say,
Factors.
factors that go into making that decision.
Sure.
Ultimately, it's subjective. I think, the business owner, the executive that is the one that's responsible for making that decision is going to make that decision for whatever reason, and it's the right reason.
All right.
But I am a believer personally in providing severance to somebody. I do think that they deserve it, especially somebody that's been around for several years. Think of it this way, regardless of the reason that you're letting them go, they've provided a number of years of service to your business. And at one point or another, they were most likely productive if
Probably
they've been there that
helpful.
long,
Sure.
right? So they have provided value to you in a certain way, and so I think it's right
Yep.
to give them an appropriate amount of severance pay.
Yeah, I wish I was better at this. It'd be easier to talk about it if I was better at it. And again, theoretically, from the mind, I know what to do. And then the heart gets in the way, and I haven't been very good. I haven't been very good at letting people go early enough in the process.
Well, I think so. So if I were to give our listeners just a couple of quick takeaways, one is have a solid hiring process and stick to that process. That is the number one way to avoid bad hires, no question. And I can tell you time and time again, every mistake that I've ever made in the hiring process has been because I've deviated from the process. So I can point right back to
Because your
that.
process does weed out their fabricating their
Absolutely.
their story, their
well, no,
resume, their whatever.
and then it's
Sure.
so part of my process too, because I didn't go through the whole process. It's they interview with multiple people.
Right.
I mean, you can't be the one person to interview them and then make a decision to hire them. Like you've got to allow the person that they're going to work with to interview them.
Work for, work with.
Yeah.
Work around.
You've got to allow, and then you got to get someone that's completely outside and objective that is really not going to have much interaction with that person to interview them as well, and let that person know the criteria that you're looking for,
Sure.
and give them some guidance into the interview process. You take that feedback all together, and then you can make a collaborative, good decision. I always recommend in a hire, it's a collaboration amongst multiple people. It should never be a siloed individual decision. You want buy-in from the team. That's critical. Cultural fit, I'm in agreement, as part of the process, looking for that cultural fit, developing criteria, having that checklist. Those are important things, right? Secondarily, though, as we talked specifically around firing fast,
Yep.
right? So, okay, great. You're going to make a bad hire. You're going to follow your process and still make a bad hire. I mean, it happens.
Yep.
It just does. And okay, so now you've got to move pretty quickly. You'll know within 90 days, as you said earlier, you're going to know pretty fast, and you got to move pretty quickly toward that decision. Great. Well, if you are transparent, if you are authentic around these type of things, performance, whatever it is, and especially like in our organization, if you have a culture of accountability, that stuff's really going to come to light.
Sure.
And if you're having those conversations early on, it's much easier to get peace to hit the point of having that conversation.
And they'll be on the same page as you at that point too.
They're going to be they're likely to be in alignment.
Yeah.
It's not going to be a surprise.
Right.
And I do think severance is ultimately a good thing. So I think if you're prepared with all of that, you're going to find a little bit more peace in the process.
Great. All right, we're going long, so we're going to cut it off here. Again, this is part 1 of a 3-part series. Next one's going to be from the employee's point of view when they've made a bad decision to come to work for me or you or whatever boss they have. Yeah. And then the third one is we're going to really dig into the toxic work culture and what to do about that. So keep listening, keep watching on YouTube. We really appreciate any feedback that you want to give us. You can get a hold of us at theceopodcast.net. scottandvince@gmail.com. Our individual emails, our individual websites. We're all over the place, so let us know what you're thinking.
Thanks for listening.
Till next time.
Cheers.
Thank you for joining us for the CEO Podcast. Please visit us at theceopodcast.net, where you can learn more about our co-hosts and listen to past episodes. If you would like to have a discussion and dive deeper into any topic, there is also an option to contact Scott or Vince to schedule some time with them. Thanks for listening.